This is Jason Snook. I'm a systems engineer. I come from about 15 or so years of working in enterprise IT, all the way from working in the help desk, sysadmin, network engineer, and then finally spent a fair amount of time as a IT consultant and IT director. That kind of leaves me with a pretty interesting perspective on not only being the tech evaluator, the tech purchaser, and then the tech integrator, now jumping over to the dark world of pre-sales. I get to share a little bit of insight into what it's like to be the IT director. Maybe share some today. Specifically, I want to talk about 5 things that I have seen in my time in enterprise IT, 5 mistakes revolving around protecting your environment. Now, the format for today, I'm going to do a little differently than I've done in the past. I want to share a quick story from my past for each one of these, go directly into some lessons learned, and then since jumping over here to the pre-sale side, I've learned quite a bit about buying. So I'm going to call this buying tips. So for every one of these mistakes, I'm going to point out a couple things that I think will make your interaction with whatever vendor you're working with. It could even be from backup and DR to any application vendor. I've learned a few things as far as buying technology, and I want to share those with you for each one of these top 5 mistakes. So jumping right in, we're going to talk about overly complicated solutions, using production systems and storage for a backup target, talking about partial versus full site recovery, what happens when you mix products and vendors, and finally the S word, we will discuss very briefly about scalability whenever we're talking about a BDR solution. So let's jump right in. Now, the one thing that is constant in technology is change, and the world of backups is no different. So back in the day, we had physical servers. We back up our physical servers and our storage to tape. Tape was one of those things that was pretty easy to use. It was very, very reliable, maybe a little bit slow, and in today's standards, it's definitely outdated. So we eventually moved into a world where we had some physical servers. Virtualization turned everything inside out, and now we have VMs to protect. The amount of storage that we have been protecting for a while now has continued to go up. I see talking to customers that are seeing, on average between 15 to 30% per year as far as increasing storage. So as our production environments have changed, so has the backup solutions. We were able to back up to tape for long-term storage. We were able to back up to disk for very quick and easy-to-use backup technology. And then we were able to trickle some of our data up to a cloud for that off-site protection. Now again, this is a few years ago, but the backup technology has definitely been changing with the production technology. So jumping to the far right here, now we're looking at what I bet a lot of you are dealing with, which are some physical servers, some VMs from different hypervisors, varying types and methods of storage. Could be NAS storage, iSCSI, could be direct attached storage, and you possibly have some workloads living out in the cloud somewhere. So AWS and Azure are great solutions for putting some of your resources or workloads out in the cloud. So the data protection side has to change also. So we're at this really fun point in time where data protection is now what we call hyperconverged. Just means that you have solutions now that will back up anything, and it will make a copy of it and put it up into a cloud or put it into an offsite DR. And recovery has gone from the old days of, hey, I need that file because it's corrupted or I lost it or it's changed or whatever, to, hey, I want to spin up a server immediately because I have an outage. That is what today's backup does. So what's the goal? So the goal of any backup and recovery solution, it's been the same for a long time. It's uptime. It's keeping your systems available to end users, to customers, regardless of what you have in-house, whether that is VMs running on Hyper-V or maybe some running on VMware or Xen or KVM, to still having physical servers. It's my personal opinion. Physical servers still have a place in today's world. A lot of companies still have them, and I think that they're going to be around for a long time. Applications are what we need to protect. We need to protect not only the data, but we need to protect the applications, making sure that they are always available. And then again, on the cloud side, if you have workloads or if you have instances up in a cloud provider, Your backup solution needs to be able to protect that. I worked with one customer once, and he told me point blank, he said, listen, anytime I talk cloud, the first thing I want to know is how do I get out of it? How do I get away from cloud in case it doesn't go right or in case the cost gets out of control? Backup solution has got to play in that space. So the other thing a backup solution has got to do is it's got to add security to your environment. Ransomware, which is a whole topic that we could talk about at a later time. Ransomware is one of those things that is a buzzword, but it's also a pretty important thing to consider. So I guess my point here is if you have a backup solution that gives you the ability that focuses on maintaining uptime, quickly restoring files, servers, and applications both locally and remote, it's going to help your security. Okay, if you have that ransomware attack, instead of rolling back the files, how about you roll back the entire system to a known good state, both, again, locally and remotely. So if you have a good backup solution, it's going to increase your security posture. So let's jump right in and talk about mistake number one. Okay, I took this job. I was living in Austin, Texas, took this job, walk into the office, and it was one of those really fun companies to work for, had a really diverse IT department, had a pretty big footprint as far as what to manage, multiple sites, a few data centers, some cloud resources. And I realized pretty quickly I had my hands full with backing everything up. Let's face it, backing stuff up, working with your backups, it's about the last thing you want to do as an IT person. It's one of those things that has to be done. I think of it in terms of insurance. You have to have insurance. But, man, you don't want to deal with insurance. It's just not fun dealing with it. And in this particular job, I walked in. We had physical, we had VMs, we had some workloads up in AWS, and then we had to have long-term archiving because we were dealing with some sensitive customer data. So I had 4 solutions to manage. I had my solution to back up VMs. I had another solution to back up and protect the physical servers. I had a completely different one that would pull data from AWS and pull it down to my local data center just in case I had to get out. Then I had a completely different archiving solution. To me, this made what should be a simple process or a simple solution, it made it into an absolute nightmare. I have a different vendor to talk to for doing software updates, hardware updates, for dealing with pricing, with dealing with licensing. 4 different vendors where one vendor could have done all of this very, very easily. So lesson learned here. Don't underestimate the power of one, okay? The power of one vendor, that single throat to choke if you have a problem, that single solution to update whenever it's time for a software or hardware update, that single solution to go to for long-term archiving or protecting against a local outage or making a copy at my DR or protecting my AWS or my cloud instances. One vendor, don't underestimate the value of that because, again, we don't want to be dealing with backups. I know I didn't. It was one of those things that was way down on my priority list. And having a single vendor is what I ultimately tried to get to, but it would have made my life a lot easier. So let's talk about a few buying tips that I've learned, okay? You're dealing with all these vendors, and let's say eventually you're going to go to a single vendor that does everything. Make them prove it to you. Ask for that trial. Trial software is one of those things that has been around forever. It's a way for you to get used to the technology. But beyond running a software trial in-house on your own equipment, there are other ways to make sure that the solution is going to fit you. Ask for a POC, proof of concept. That means if it's a appliance-based backup solution, ask to see it in person. Ask to see an actual demonstration of it running. And if you're still not happy with that, ask for a temporary use POC box, okay, or POC appliance. Or if it's software only, ask for a full version for 30 days. Make sure they train you on it, okay? If that doesn't work, or if that doesn't get you to the point where you are comfortable with that vendor, ask for a return, okay? Ask for a return period. It's one of those things that you may or may not get, but you may as well ask for it, okay? So these are some of the things that I've learned as far as buying that I think that you can leverage to make your buying process with your vendor a little easier. So talking about mistake number 2. Okay, I was an IT consultant for about 5 years. I lived in Austin, Texas. Being an IT consultant is one of those really fun jobs because you get to work into so many different customers and see so many different IT layouts or IT departments. So I get called out in the morning. to a new customer. We've never engaged with them before, and they're having, hairs on fire call. We roll out there, and we realize they've got a lot of, what everybody has, which is a lot of IT resources they need to protect. They made a decision based on primarily on cost to leverage some free space on their SAN for backups. Okay, that solution bit them in the butt pretty severely. Okay, because they ended up having a SAN outage with no replica, meaning they've got this SAN that held all of their VMs, held all of their production data. A lot of people do that. But they carved off a couple volumes on the SAN for backup data. They're using a software-only version of a backup solution. That particular solution, still around today, starts with a V, ends with an M. Super common software to go with, and it's very enticing to go with a software-only solution that leverages production hardware. In this particular case, this company lost their SAN, lost their backups, and eventually had to stand up new hardware and send that SAN off to have the actual data pulled off of it, which cost a lot of money and took up a lot of time. And if they had just deployed their backup solution on non-production equipment, they would have not been dealing with this. They would have been dealing with a standard recovery scenario. Okay, so lessons learned here: avoid the temptation. Okay, do an apples-to-apples comparison between, let's say, a vendor that sells a software-only version of backup and recovery towards a company that sells the all-in-one solution, which includes storage, which includes I/O, which includes the software technology that is required to back up and recover systems. Do an apples-to-apples comparison, because I bet that by the time you get down to the net price, the cost of buying software, buying a hypervisor, buying a server dedicated to backups is probably about the same as that vendor that offers that all-in-one or all-inclusive solution. Don't make that, again, avoid the temptation of saving money, because I'm telling you, if you're going to save money by leveraging production systems, you run the risk of what I call RGE, a resume generating event. Okay, this particular case, this particular company didn't have an IT person. They had just laid that person off, so they were looking at outsourcing everything. So no one lost their job in this one, but I'm pretty sure if that admin was there, he probably would have been looking for a new job, because that's a pretty dramatic and severe mistake to make. So those are my lessons learned for using production systems and storage. And again, for buying tips, you might be surprised about that apples-to-apples comparison. Create your RPO and RTO expectations. RPO is how long can you go, how much data can you lose. RTO is recovery time objective. RTO means how long can you be down. Once you create those expectations, go out and buy a solution that meets those. Okay, so your buying tip there is make sure that you understand what the potential of loss is before you go out and shop for a solution. And then if the cost of the solution that you must have is just too expensive, then consider doing it in phases. Okay? There's no reason to buy a cheap solution when you could buy the Cadillac of BDR solutions and do it in phases, meaning do the local protection first, implement offsite DR at some other point in the future. Okay, that is one way to get into that Cadillac BDR solutions is to do it in a phased approach. But again, don't leverage production SAN. Don't even leverage production VMware hosts. So many backup technologies today are to the point where they're taking snapshots or taking your data and then creating this clone or this VM clone on their technology that leverages a hypervisor. Don't use the same hypervisor that you run production systems on. What if that hypervisor goes down and it includes, let's say, the management piece for your backup solution? Again, if a production outage causes a backup outage, you've got a flaw in your design. Get away from that solution. Get away from that design. Let's jump to number 3 here, partial versus full site recovery. Okay, so working in this market research company in Austin, one of my coworkers deployed an operating system change. He only did it on a couple systems. Okay, we had in that particular job we had a neighborhood of 30 or so physical and VMs. He deployed an OS change that caused a cascading event. Cascading meaning it only affected 2 servers for about 10 minutes, It affected about 20 servers after an hour. That problem crawled from OS to OS to OS, caused a huge, huge problem. It was one of those very memorable moments that I'd like to never repeat. Here's the deal. At the time, we had what I thought was a really good BDR solution until I tried to spin up 30 or 20 or so VMs on it. See, that BDR solution was built to handle backup everything, but it wasn't designed around the premise of recovering everything. By the time I booted up, I think the third VM out of 20 or so that I needed to boot up, it was at capacity. That thing had no memory left. The I/O was completely crushed by what I was trying to do. So I was faced with a horrible scenario of, okay, do I try and do a file level backup, or do I do a BDR for some of my more critical machines? How do I get back online? And the premise of this story here, the summary of this story is, get away, understand if you're dealing with a backup solution that provides the ability to only recover a handful, then you probably should look elsewhere. Because the pain of having to choose what is online versus what is still offline while you rebuild it over the course of an evening or a weekend, that is not a fun decision to be on. Okay, that's not something that you want to have to consider. There are backup, there are recovery solutions, there are full-on DR solutions out there that will back up your environment, make a copy of it remotely, and allow you to have enough horsepower to run everything local and everything remote without impacting performance. That is what you should demand. Okay, so a few lessons learned about that. Don't underestimate how painful it will be to have to choose the systems that you recover. Okay, that is not a pretty place to be. Do you power up the domain controller and the Exchange server and not your file server? That is not a place that you want to be. Test before you buy it. Does your BDR solution does it hit that RTO, that recovery time objective, for everything, not just data, not just a few servers, not just a few applications, but everything? RTO is one of those terms that should guide your purchasing decision. How long is it acceptable for you to be back online? And when I say online, I mean everything back online. Everyone here has probably a background in some sort of hardware. Okay, we understand hardware specs. Do your research, and if you're dealing with an appliance-based backup company, do a little research on the hardware before you ever talk to them. Okay, what would it actually take on your end to spin up clones of everything? Is it X number of memory? Is it X number of cores? Is it X number of terabytes of space? Do a little research to find out that before you go out and buy that next BDR solution. And again, for buying tips on this one, demand a trial. Demand that they show you that you can spin up all of your entire environment at the same time. Okay? On demos that I do, I make sure that I show not only spinning up a single VM, but if they want me to show them spinning up the entire environment, I'll show them with a single click that we can spin up an entire environment. So demand a trial that mimics your environment, not just a canned trial that you see on YouTube. Demand something that looks like your environment. Ask this question. How much can I run on this? Okay, if the backup vendor says it is designed to run 2 of your VMs, then look elsewhere, because there are solutions out there where you can run your entire environment for about the same cost as running 1 or 2 or 3 of your VMs. And finally, if you're dealing with that appliance-based vendor, backup vendor, have an idea of how much hardware costs. If you're dealing with a 2U appliance that has 50 terabytes and 20 cores and 384 gigs of memory, have an idea about what that would cost. Okay, go into that conversation with the knowledge of, if they hit me with a hardware price that's 3x what I could buy it on Dell or HP or Supermicro, then you know that you might be overpaying, or there's something baked into the solution that you're not seeing. So know how much hardware costs. Know how much you're going to need. Because again, the thing where you're having to decide what to recover, prioritizing which one gets recovered and which one doesn't, it's a really unpleasant place to be. All right, mistake number 4, mixing products and vendors. By a show of digital hands, how many people have dealt with the finger pointing game, where you call up vendor A and they say, no, it's not my problem, it's the other vendor. Or you call up that vendor and they say, you know what, I've done all my troubleshooting steps. Not me, it's got to be your network side. Dealing with mixing and matching products and vendors is one of those things that I'd love to get away with. Let's roll back to mistake number one and result number one. The power of one vendor is so valuable in this. Okay, again, at a previous job, that market research company, we had so many different vendors in play. And I called up the backup vendor to help me diagnose, hey, why are backups taking so long? You know what they did? They told me that it's not their problem. It's the disk I/O on the particular appliance that I was running it on. Or they told me, no, you don't have enough bandwidth to replicate to the offsite. Well, at that case, at that time, I think I had 10 megs out to the internet. How is that not enough to replicate? So the finger pointing game is one of the most frustrating things to be on from the end user point of view. I want you to avoid it. The way you avoid it is to go back to that power of one. One vendor will get you past that. One vendor to call if you need help with an update. One vendor to call if you have a support issue, if something's not backing up or something's not replicating correctly. One vendor who has support that's based in the United States. That is one of those things where if you're mixing and matching products and vendors, where is the support coming from? Who do you call if you need support for the replication piece? Or who do you call if you need support for pulling backups off of AWS? Those type of things are things that you can resolve by having a single vendor. Okay, here's some buying tips for this. Ask this question. Ask, where's your support team located at? If it's outsourced support or if it's a completely different continent, then ask that question. You should know before you get into a new solution with support that may or may not even be coming from the company that develops the solution. Okay, is their support outsourced? Is the support coming from a reseller who's been trained in tier 1 support only? Ask those questions. Who are they? Are they people who hold the hat of the company, or are they people who are just a reseller and doing their best to try and diagnose the problem? Is it callback only support? That's one thing that you want to find out. Do I call into 1-800-HELP and do I get someone, or do I go into a queue and have to wait 4 days for a callback? Ask these questions before you buy that solution. Here's another one. Ask where the development work is being done. Okay? A lot of companies use third-party developers to develop their software. That is a really good approach. However, in my opinion, a better approach is to have internal developers that they can leverage, the support people can leverage to ask, hey, I'm seeing this problem. What is it in our software that could possibly be causing that? If you're dealing with a vendor that designs and develops their own software with their own employees, most likely your support experience is going to be a lot better. And then finally, who makes the hardware? Ask that question. If you're in a solution where you are mixing products and vendors, who's making the hardware? Is it white box? Is it OEM from Dell or HP? Does it come with a hardware warranty? Ask these questions during that sales process. Make sure that you're comfortable with the answers. Because if you're comfortable with callback support and white box hardware that is supported by somebody else, then by all means go with that solution. But if you want support that comes from the company, and dev that comes from the company, and OEM hardware that comes with a very good hardware warranty, then there are vendors out there that will do that for you. Mistake number 5, the last one, scalability. Okay, so I have an environment out there that I love to add VMs to because, let's face it, I'm a technologist. I like to play with technology, so I would add VMs. There's a term out there called data and or VM sprawl. Pretty common with virtualization because it's so darn easy to spin up a new VM and test something out or to deploy an application. It's so easy to add a little bit of storage to your SAN or even combine another SAN and make it look like one. So the ability to scale out your production environment, in my opinion, has never been easier. And it's been so easy for you to tell your boss to say, hey, we can now keep data for a little bit longer. Our average yearly growth rate, maybe it used to be 5% back in the day, but now that that storage is relatively inexpensive. It might be 30% because we're doing new and interesting things with it. You might be getting into big data, which is going to exponentially grow your storage. So knowing that your production is probably pretty easy to grow, what if you have a BDR solution? What if your backup solution would require a forklift upgrade to increase capacity? Would you, if you could go back in time, would you do it? Would you, if knowing that if you had to completely rip out hardware, your backup hardware, your backup solution to increase capacity, would you do it? Because in my opinion, scalability is a pretty big concern. It's one of those things where if your production environment is going to grow, your backup environment had better be as easy to grow, okay? The idea here is that you grow your backup environment by independently, meaning if your storage demands grow, your backup solution should grow the storage side independently of VM protection. So what that means is, let's say your company went from 10 terabytes today to 15 terabytes next year. You should be able to grow your BDR solution, just grow the capacity side, just grow the storage side independently of VMs. Let's take it to the other side. What if your production environment goes from 30 VMs today to 50 VMs next year? Well, your backup vendor should be able to increase capacity just on the number of VMs, not necessarily the number of or the amount of storage. So ask those questions. Ask the question about scalability from your next BDR vendor, okay? Make sure that it is built to scale. Ask them what calculations have gone into daily or yearly growth. Are they assuming 5% growth, 10% growth, 30 or more % growth for their backup solution that they're pitching you? Ask that question. And then there's a whole different side to this, okay? There's obviously your production environment can grow storage, I/O, applications, but what about licensing? What about licensing in the BDR model? Is your backup vendor licensed based on core, based on sockets, based on the number, just the flat number of servers that you're protecting? Make sure that you understand fully what your licensing looks like before you go down the purchasing path, okay? If you think that your company is going to go from 30 VMs to 50 VMs, make sure that the licensing model of your BDR is not going to gouge you once you hit a certain number, okay? Here's a buying tip for you. Use that licensing model to your advantage. Do not be afraid to ask for some extra cap relief, okay? If it's a per socket level, ask for a free socket if you reach a certain number, if you purchase a certain number of sockets. If it's a per core number, do the same. Ask for a free core license. There'd be nothing worse. Everyone goes through server change, meaning we might be going from rolling out server 2016 now and decommissioning some 2008 and 2003 servers. But you're probably going to have those servers running at the same time eventually, so there's got to be some mechanism in place on the license side to back them both up for a short amount of time. That's what I mean by asking for a little bit of cap room relief. Run this scenario about capacity by your rep. How do they answer those questions? Okay, if you ask your sales rep the question, well, what if I go from 10 to 15 terabytes? What does that look like? If there's not a quick and clear and easy to understand response, then your backups, their backup solution that they're trying to sell you, they probably haven't thought about scale, or they want to get you into the lowest, the smallest possible box on day one and hope that you'll come crawling back and asking for more storage, at the next year. Avoid that scenario. Avoid the scenario where your backup solution won't scale. It's one of those very important things that could really bite you in the future as your production environment goes up. So, what should a backup solution look like? What should it do for you? So, it's got to be simple, okay? It's got to avoid that complicated solution where you've got multiple vendors in play. It's got to be dependable, okay? It's got to sit aside from production systems. It's got to be comprehensive, okay? Comprehensive is a big one. It's got to provide total protection of data, servers, and applications. All of it, not just a little bit of it. It's got to be comprehensive protection. It should be unified. Get away from, number one, okay, get away from multiple vendors. Unified means it should be able to back up VMs, physical, any storage, and any cloud resource. It's got to be that one vendor that you use for backups because, again, we don't like dealing with backups. IT guys don't like dealing with their backup solution. They just want it to work. And so it's got to be robust. It's got to grow with your company, okay? This is where Quorum comes in. So Quorum's approach to the ever-changing state of production and BDR platforms is this. We back up your systems. Our solution is focused on something different than our competitors. Our focus is recovering applications, data, servers, all of it. We're going to make a copy of your servers at your local data center, hold it on our solution locally, and we'll make another copy, hold it on an offsite DR. We are that one vendor that offers a backup solution. We offer instant recovery, offsite replication to your site or to us, our cloud. Our solution is designed to automatically test not only the data, but the instant recovery component of our solution. You can also use Quorum as your sandbox. You can use it to test patches, changes, updates, whatever. Archiving to us is native. Okay, you don't have to go to another vendor for archiving. It's built into the solution. We've completely rebuilt the BMR process. BMR is bare metal restore. Let's say you love our solution, you run some of your environment on it. If you have an outage, well, at some point you have to get back to production. We have completely rebuilt BMR from the ground up to build operating systems, to build servers and applications on your production systems from the backup data that's sitting on our appliance. And we monitor your entire environment for outages. That is the overall solution set of Quorum. How do we do it? Well, taking a look at your local data center, we're going to install either a pre-built appliance, which happens to be OEM through Dell, so you have a hardware warranty that comes along with it, or you can deploy our solution on your own hardware running as a virtual appliance. We're going to back everything up. We're going to deduplicate it. We're going to compress it. We're going to give you an environment or a solution in that phased approach. Phase one is protecting everything locally, giving you the ability to instantly recover a server. When I mean instant, I mean press a button and it's powered on. Okay? If your file server goes down, you don't need to restore the files to another file server. Go to the Quorum appliance, press a button. Very simple solution here. A button, press it, and that file server, a copy of the file server will be running on the Quorum appliance. Okay? Now, phase two, let's deploy an offsite replication. Offsite can either be to Quorum's cloud or it can be to your secondary site. The end result is literally a copy of your data center sitting at the offsite DR. Now, let's talk about Quorum's cloud. It's private. It's completely hosted by us. We do not resell a public cloud. Okay? It's our employees who manage the data. Our cloud is PCI certified and HIPAA compliant. This means that we take security extremely seriously, okay? We're going to hold your data and your servers and your applications up in our cloud, so if you have that site-wide outage, you can continue to operate. DR testing is included, meaning you can test the DR functionality at any time without impacting performance. That is our solution. Again, it's designed around the idea that you should be able to have one vendor to protect everything, to recover everything.